I'm sorry, that's not why I'm here. Sorry.
Got on his liturgist thing, right? Okay. I don't know if Mark wanted to do a sound check, but I guess it's okay.
I guess we just did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good to have you here. I'm so grateful, and I know Sai is, that you came out on this very, very rainy afternoon, and we know that we'll get a blessing from his talking about his book and this process and all that he's done. And so whatever we can do to make you comfortable here at Rockville United Methodist Church, let us do that. The necessary rooms are just right off the narthex if you need them. Now I want to invite Mike Beidler to come forward. He is well, come on, Mike, and tell him who you are. We're grateful that you are here.
All right, good evening. Now, how many of you know Sai? So no introductions required, I think. Who does not know Sai? Okay, we'll forego the whole biography thing. So my name is Mike Beidler. I'm on the board of directors of the American Scientific Affiliation. And we've got some literature out there. We've got some flyers, like brochures that tell about the organization. We've got some samples of our quarterly journal, Perspectives on Science and Christian Faith. They're not for the taking, but you're welcome to bring them in here and browse through them. That may spark some interest in eventually joining the American Scientific Affiliation. And who are we? We're the world's largest and oldest network of Christians in the sciences. And sciences is interpreted broadly. It's not just the physical and the life sciences, but also the social sciences, political science, psychology, neuroscience. So if you have a bachelor's degree in the sciences, you're welcome to join. And here in the DC area, we've got about 24 chapters across the United States and Canada. But here in the DC region, Sai and I have been leading the chapter for the last, 10 years. Paul Arbison. Paul, and where's Maynard? Maynard Moore. Where are you? Oh, there he is, right behind Paul. They're former officers that Paul led for, 25 years? Something like that. But we've been a presence here in the DC region for quite some time, and we try to meet on a quarterly basis. And this summer, we're actually having our annual meeting, in which probably around 300 to 500 of our members will meet here at Catholic University of America, July 26th through the 29th. And it's Friday through a Monday. And we're going to have some great plenary speakers like Dr. Francis Collins, head of the Human Genome Project and former director of the National Institutes of Health. We've got Charmaine Royal. We've got Brandon Badyanathan. He's a sociologist from Catholic U. Who else do we have? Praveen Sethupathi. He's a geneticist, and Beth Allison Barr, and she is the author of Recovering Biblical Womanhood. So we invite you to explore our website as well, asa3.org. The address is on our brochure, and we'd love to see you come out to Catholic U this summer. And here's a copy of the journal, just so you know what you're looking at on the table. So afterwards, we are going to have a post-meeting dinner. And for those of you who are ASA members, it was going to be one of two things, depending upon how many people we got the RSVP. It's a lot more than we thought. So we're actually going with a third option. And it's right around the same area, but Plaza Oaxaca. It's a Mexican restaurant. So if you don't know where it is or don't know how to spell it, just Google Plaza O and it should pop up. We're going to do that afterwards. And so we've got a reservation for 7 o'clock. Show up right after this, and it'll take a little time for them to get everything set up, but we should be good to go. But Cy, you've got a new book out. You heard that. You know it's out and available in to read, right? So it is available on Amazon.com, and we've got some copies of the book available for you tonight for purchase. And Cy is gracious enough to even sign them for us. But it is called, let me make sure I get the title, full title correct, Science and Faith in Harmony. And then the subtitle is Contemplations on a Distilled Orthodoxy. Oh, Doxology. I had that wrong in Distilled Doxology. Boy, that's embarrassing. But forward written by Sean McDowell of Biola University. And if you don't know who Sean McDowell is, you may know his father, Josh McDowell, who wrote More Than a Carpenter and Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And we've got some great reviewers in the book, great blurbs on the back. So hopefully this book will be just as successful, if not more so, than your previous one, The Work of His Hands, which is also excellent. So if you're not familiar with that, do you have both copies?
I don't have the other one.
Don't have the other one? But I guarantee you'll love the book. I spent the last 3 weeks reading it. And I think there's a review in the front that basically says, reading this book is like eating a bag of peanuts. You start with one or two, and then before you know it, you finish the whole bag. And that's a great description of this book. So, Cy, I'd like you to come up, and you're going to conduct a few readings from the book, and then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards, and then we'll have a time of fellowship out front before we head to dinner.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Pastor Martha, for the welcome. Before I start reading, I wanted to say something to the folks here. Maybe some of you have gotten married, right? And what's the first thing that happens when you marry somebody? You end up with two families. You have your own family, and you're also part of the family of your spouse. And sometimes that is not wonderful, but sometimes it is. And why am I saying this here? Because in front of me now are my two families. My church family, who I love, and my ASA family, who I also love. And for me, this is just a wonderful experience because so many of you are here. And so thank you for coming, especially on this beautiful day. As Mike said, I'm going to do some readings. And you can, if something I say while I'm reading prompts you to want to make a comment or ask a question, please don't wait for the end, just raise your hand. And I might call on you depending on who you are and what I think you might say. No, seriously, it can be a discussion. I want to start, and it's interesting that I didn't coach Mike to flub the title, but I wanted to start anyway talking about the title. And the reason is, excuse me, my original title had been Harmony, the Relationship Between Science and Faith. Now, as you may or may not know, writers never give the title to their books. It's always done by the publisher. And the publisher kind of liked that title, but they didn't like it that much, and they switched it to what it is. And they came up with Contemplations on a Distilled Doxology, which is a mouthful, right? And at first I thought, I don't know. But then I realized I really liked it. So the first readings that I'm going to do, before I say that, I should just tell you that, what I'm in the process of now is marketing the book, right? Which means I go on a lot of radio shows, give interviews, YouTube things, all kinds of stuff like that. And it's struck me recently that in almost every interview I've given so far, people keep bringing up the title, both the title and the subtitle. And so I think the title is interesting, more interesting than I originally thought. So I want to start by reading a short excerpt from the introduction, which is called The Mystery of Harmony, which talks about the idea of harmony between science and faith. And then I have an actual chapter called Distilled Doxology, and I'm going to read a short excerpt from that. And the two together should hopefully explain something about what the title means and why it's the title. So this is the first part, which is from The Mystery of Harmony, which was originally chapter 1, but then they just made it an introduction. I grew up in a musical family, and music has always been as important to me as science. When I became a believer, it struck me that music is itself a form of prayer. There is something deeply moving and mysterious about harmony. It has rules, and those rules are related to the mathematical distance between the frequencies of simultaneous sound waves. But that physical description tells us nothing about why certain intervals have very different effects on our enjoyment of the music. Why am I talking about music and harmony in a book about science and faith? Because of the parallels. When we say something is harmonious with something else, we don't mean the two things are the same. On the contrary, harmony requires that they not be. Rather, we mean that two different notes or ideas, colors, statements, photographs in an arrangement, decorations on a cake, and so on, go well together. Not just despite their differences, but because of them. This book is based on the idea that the scientific worldview is harmonious with Christian faith. The two rarely say the exact same thing, and they are played on different instruments, but they combine to produce a deeply satisfying and spiritually uplifting picture of our world and everything in it, including us. So that's sort of the summary of where the idea of harmony comes from and what I mean by harmony. Now, in terms of the subtitle, Distilled Doxology, I'll just, we all know what the doxology is, praise. It's something I had to learn when I first came to church. I'd never heard the word before. And what about distillation? Distillation is a important chemical process for purification. So distilled doxology could be interpreted as pure praise. And this is what's in the book. Do Christians have a burden of proof for their belief in God or the truth of Jesus Christ? This is a meaningless question for many reasons. It usually refers to scientific proof, a nonsensical idea since science is not in the business of proving anything. Proof belongs only in mathematics and logic. All scientific understanding is subject to change when new ideas appear. Therefore, proof, which suggests arriving at a final solution to a problem, is not subject to change, is not an option in real science. Furthermore, when told I have a burden of proof, my response is, to whom? If I am describing my findings in a scientific paper, I have the burden of explaining to my colleagues and others why I have come to my conclusions. I would include the results of my experiments and observations. All of this is important. It enables the rest of the scientific community to judge the strength of my argument and weigh the chances that it's valid and true. But in matters of faith, we are not trying to advance a new idea about the nature of the world that we expect everyone will agree on. Our burden of proof is not scientific in nature, and we need not convince anyone but ourselves. Since I became a Christian, I've continued to do scientific research in theoretical biology. And when I find something I think is significant or important, I have the same feeling of wonder and gratitude I had when I worked in the lab as an atheist. I am thankful for the chance to pursue science, but now I know to whom I owe my thanks. Whatever we do in our working lives, from building houses to cooking food, from running a business to driving a taxi, we can learn about the world and the nature of God as its creator. When scientists do scientific research in the lab or in the field or at our computers, we try to make discoveries about the world, about the nature of God's creation that have never been known before. When we are successful and find a new enzyme, or the mechanism by which a disease can occur, or a new formula that describes a physical phenomenon, or when we observe a new astronomical object, we tell the world about it with our scientific papers. At that point, we and all who are interested have learned something true about the creation. How better to praise God than by living the words of the old hymn, "Praise him, all creatures here below." Scientific research is pure praise, worship refined by distillation, distilled doxology. So that's what I'm going to say about the title. I'll take a pause if there's any comments or questions. If not, I'll keep going. Mike, we have a Michael here too.
When you were an atheist in the lab and you made a discovery of some sort, how did that make you feel? And to what did you attribute that feeling?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm thinking about the answer because I haven't thought about it before. I think it made me feel really good about myself. Because when a scientist makes a discovery, especially a scientist at an earlier age of their career, when it's all about moving forward and progressing and, getting to the next promotion, et cetera. If you make a discovery and you publish it, that's good for yourself. Now, there is also, of course, the idea that you're helping the world somehow because you've made some discovery, so that will be useful. But to be very honest, although we talk about that a lot, that's in the public relations a lot. We just discovered something that will help cure a disease or feed more people. There's that. But when you're a Christian and you make a discovery about God's creation, it goes way beyond that. There's a whole nother thing that comes in, which is, wow, thank you, Lord, for giving me this answer about your creation. And you just feel humble and worshipful. It's very different, and it's far better than being a scientist without God, in my view. And I'm not alone. I think, well, there's many scientists here, and they can tell whether or not that's true, but I think it is. But thanks for the question, Mike. That's good. Rick?
I'm sorry, I was just curious. Along the same lines, have you ever gone back to contemplate one of your prior findings or analysis or conclusions in light of your newfound faith? And did you see anything differently?
Yes, and I think this one of the chapters here is about that. Back in 2004, I think it was, when I was kind of an agnostic at that point, but I did discover something about the fractal nature of DNA, which I'm not going to get into what that means, but it turns out that DNA is fractal. It means it has a weird kind of shape. And I've thought about that often since I became a Christian, because there's a whole area of thought about what it means. In fact, who wrote a book? Oh, somebody wrote a book a very famous topologist, wrote a book called About the Fractal Universe, about God's fractal universe. So yeah, that got me thinking about that I hadn't thought of in that way before. Boy, these questions are challenging. Okay. Dan, yeah.
So I really enjoy the book. I have really a couple of questions. One
Sure.
is, over what time of your life did these ideas come together? And is this something that you've been writing these down for the last 10 years or more, or something like that? But it's really an excellent piece. One thing that you wrote on page 48 in your book that I thought was very insightful, but also interesting in terms of where we are failing, maybe in the church and maybe also in our education. You write there on page 48, before one can succeed at creating new things, one needs to be thoroughly proficient and knowledgeable about old, traditional ways. I learned the hard way that this is true in carpentry, music, and especially science.
Yeah.
How are we failing in the church to teach the old ways, or in science even, or even our culture?
Wow, Dan, that is a great question. I don't know if I can answer it about the church. I mean, I think I have some ideas, and I'm sure Pastor Martha and others might also have some. But well, I guess I could just say something about music, since that's what I often talk about in this book. You know, we at this church, we have a wonderful choir and music department, and we sing traditional hymns, and we sing I don't know, some other hymns that are less than purely traditional, but we don't have a rock group. We don't have the worship band kind of thing that a lot of churches are doing. And I've been to churches with worship bands, and I don't have anything against rock music and other kinds of alternative music. But I sometimes think perhaps it would be good to have this background of the traditional, you know, gospel music, or whatever we want to call it, the traditional hymns that sort of lay the foundation for me anyway. And maybe just because I'm an old guy, but you know, and then go and do the other stuff too. I mean, you know, I mean, used to play rock when I was a kid, so I'm not against it. But there's something about singing certain hymns that just, you know, they do something to me. And you don't get that from other. Now, is that true for sermons? Is that true for other parts of how the church works? I don't know. That's sort of beyond me. In terms of science, it's really important because the scientific method is based on centuries of practice and methodology. And we need to know that, but we cannot, and this is a really important point, as scientists, we cannot be unduly restricted by the ways we used to do things, especially in biology. And I'll say it right now, in case anyone hasn't heard me say it. I am writing another book as we speak. And that book is going to be about what I just said, that biology needs to go into new directions if we're going to make any progress, and if we're going to make any scientific progress. So we need to do both in music and in science and in theology. We need to have the grounding. And this chapter was all about, you know, my grandfathers, both of whom were skilled craftsmen. One was an upholsterer, one was a carpenter, and they taught me a lot. And, you know, there was no varying from this is how you cut a piece of wood. Okay. There's no other way. It's this way. Some of you probably have had similar experiences with the older generation and now are doing it to your kids. Well, that's true. But, you know, from there you can build. But if you don't have that background, you can't build. You can't build on anything. You're making it up from scratch. And I use carpentry because try to ask someone who's never held a hammer or a saw before to make something, it's not going to work. They're not going to be able to do it. Thanks for that, Dan. Well, I wasn't expecting. Okay. Any more questions? This is making me think. So, I think what I would like to do is go to another chapter. I'm sorry, I just have to find it here. Now, everybody has, I've already heard from several people that their favorite chapter is this. If you have a favorite chapter that you'd like to hear from, it's like when we do hymns at the beginning, right? You call out the hymn number. In this case, call out the chapter number, and I'll try to see if I can find something to read from it. But I want to read something from chapter 8, which is called The Voice of God. Have you wondered about God's silence? Have you thought, I pray to God, but he doesn't answer me? As an atheist, I believe that if anyone thought God spoke to them, they were probably crazy. But after I became a believer, I realized that God had been speaking to me for most of my life. I just wasn't listening. God speaks to us in many ways, through many different media. Sometimes it's a song we hear while driving that inspires us with its beauty. Or it's the words or actions of a friend or even a stranger. And sometimes God speaks to us through other creatures. Almost 25 years ago, I was at a crossroads in my life. I considered myself an agnostic. I wasn't sure about God, but I thought there might be something to spiritual experiences, something not quite explainable. Other times I thought maybe all that was just wishful thinking. Near the end of a family vacation in a cabin on the coast of Maine, I took my small outboard engine-powered skiff out for a solo ride. For some reason, and for the first time, I ventured far out from shore. This is in the ocean, by the way. Past the islands that usually mark my limit of exploration and into a broad channel in the open Atlantic Ocean. The day was beautiful and the weather was calm. But then I saw a dark, ominous shadow in the water right next to the boat. It was bigger than the boat and moving fast. I was terrified. A few seconds later, I saw another one on the other side of the boat. And then one of the shadows rose and broke the surface. It was a dolphin. As I watched them, I began to realize that this pair of dolphins, swimming next to me and then crossing in front of the boat, were not just playing, they were guiding me. They were aware that I was too far out in the ocean for such a small boat, and they were leading me back toward the shore. Heading back in with my wonderful escort, I began to feel not only calm, but a sense of gratitude and love for these creatures of nature who clearly had more good sense than I did and when they were taking care of me. After a short while I was back where I belonged, they disappeared, and I returned to shore in a state of wonder. The spiritual sense I felt from that experience on the sea stayed with me. My life began to change, first in small but increasingly clear ways, and I was firmly on my long journey in search of faith. More recently, my wife and I went on vacation to the Maine coast, not far from where I had been 25 years ago. We signed on for a 2-hour scenic cruise on a large tourist schooner. As we were sailing out into the ocean, the day was gorgeous and the views spectacular. The captain was regaling us with stories about his vessel when suddenly somebody pointed sternward. The captain turned and announced, "We are very lucky, folks. We have company." I looked out just past the stern, and there they were, 2 dolphins, breaking the water in plain view and putting on a small show for the passengers. But I knew better. They were there for me. God was once again speaking to me, and these 2 dolphins were his voice. I had been gone a long time, and now I was back, a different man, a believer. And these messengers were there for me once again to give me a sign. God was giving me a sign of encouragement and affirmation. I felt a great sense not only of peace, but also of gratitude for being able to hear the voice of God in the natural world. God has shown me signs of mercy and hope my whole life, even when I scorned his existence. I know I have not always made the right choices or lived according to his will, but I am hopeful that this sign of his favor might be a token of acknowledgement that my path has not been in vain. When you think God is not answering you, listen more carefully with your ears, mind, and all your senses. After you pray, be attentive. You may not hear a booming voice from the heavens, but you might see a smile from someone you love. You might hear a bird song that moves you with its clarity. You might experience a kindness from a stranger or an expression of gratitude from a child. Or if you're lucky, you might hear God's voice in the grace and solicitude of one of his creatures, even a dolphin. I had chosen a bunch of chapters and extracts to read, but we started a little late and I'm not going to get to them all. So yeah, Eddie. Wait for the mic.
Yes, I just want to make a comment. I've already read the book for the first time already. And I just would like, I really appreciated the way, I try my best to understand the science of it. I have my faith. And the way that you describe how we should see God in everything, not just, when you come to church and this, that, and the other, but see God in everything. And the way you connected all the dots for me is just great. So I just wanted you to know that. So,
Thank you, Eddie.
thank you.
Amen to that.
I think I'll do one more. This is chapter 4. So far, you haven't heard any science in what I've read. This one has a little bit. This is chapter 4. It's called Spring and Energy. How does the onset of spring make you feel? In the weeks when the first flowers push through the earth, birds begin their morning song, and leaf buds appear on the trees, my wife and I go for walks in the woods to watch the progress of nature waking from winter slumber. The grass turns green, and so do many plants and leaves that provide food for the hungry deer and rabbits. Foxes come out to hunt the plant eaters, and hawks fly in graceful, deadly circles. The earth is coming alive, and the beautiful drama of life is once more on display. Seeing all of this, I'm immersed in the beauty, but I also think about the miraculous biochemistry that makes it all possible. Life on Earth depends on energy from the sun. That includes the heat, which keeps water liquid, enabling the chemistry of life to occur. But the energy that powers the cells of living creatures does not come from the sun's heat. It comes from the sun's light. That may be why God did not say, let there be heat, but let there be light. Photosynthesis is a chemical process that converts the energy in sunlight into the chemical energy that life needs. I first studied photosynthesis as a graduate student. There were major gaps in our understanding of it at that time, but what I learned was so complex as to border on the mystical. Among the many amazing features of the process is the final step, in which a torrent of positively charged protons of hydrogen atoms are guided into a machine made of proteins that includes a rotating wheel, also made of protein. The electrical and chemical energy of the free protons is converted into the mechanical energy of the turning wheel. And that mechanical energy is harnessed to produce the chemical energy of a molecule called ATP, which is the energy currency that all life uses. So when you go for a walk in the spring sunshine, look around you at all the living things you can see. Don't forget to include yourself and your companion, who are parts of the body of nature as well as of the body of Christ. And whether you are thinking of the amazing ability of tiny protons and electrons to navigate their inexplicable ways down energy gradients, or the beauty of the songs of so many birds, or both, say a prayer of thanks to God for his creation, for living plants, for the beautiful color green, and for this amazing universe that leads us, the more we learn about it, to bow in awe at the majesty of its creator. And I think that section might illustrate what I mean by harmony. In other words, you know, we see the beauty of God's creation, and everybody can see that. But when we know the biochemistry of how that beauty comes to be, that adds this extra line of harmony to the beautiful melody. And I think that's the case I try to make in many other chapters. And, it's quarter up. I guess I could, yeah, Dan?
Could I have another question?
Mm-hmm.
This is a little bit more on the science as a molecular biologist. In chapter 15, you talk about the DNA, Christianity, Christian fellowship and DNA. And page 89, you talk a little bit about being a gene-centric molecular biologist, but then you shifted your view to non-gene-centric because you saw something that was different. And can you say something more about that and maybe what that meant to you theologically or in your Christian life, a shift like that?
Yeah, that, I think I'm going to wait to talk to you directly about that, because that would take me about an hour. It's a huge topic. It's a question of whether we should still be gene centric. In other words, everything comes from genes or not. And as I said, that is a huge topic. And I wouldn't be able to begin to cover it. So let's talk about it later. Great question, though. Thank you. Sorry, Mike, a little louder. Oh, yeah. Oh, you know, Mike, at his introduction, talked about us, the ASA group, going out to dinner. Everyone from the church is invited as well, right? Mike? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So if you're free for dinner, if not, we can talk about it another time. But if you're free for dinner and want to join, you know, please feel free. I mean, like I said, this is a merger of two families, so it's all one big family. So yeah, we can talk about that. I think I have time for one more. Oh, yeah, this is another one that kind of also talks about the harmony of things. I may cut down a little bit on how much I wanted to say. Okay. This is chapter 17. It's called Quantum Reality 2 Duality. There's an earlier chapter called Quantum Reality 1. Okay. If a baseball bat is 100% wood, it can't also be made of aluminum. There are wooden bats and aluminum bats, but the same bat can be one or the other, not both. That's a standard rule of logic and rationality. But there's a twist. And that twist in science comes from the physics of electrons. We know that electrons, which are one of the smallest units of matter, and is also responsible for electricity, are tiny particles that go around the atoms. In chemistry, we find that electrons are also the electrical components for making chemical bonds between atoms, resulting in molecules. But now here's the twist. Electrons are also waves, like light or sound. And there's no question about this. This is absolute scientific truth, fact. Some of their behavior can only be explained within a wave model. And other parts of their behavior can only be explained if they are particles. This doesn't seem to make sense. We would think that electrons, like baseball bats, should either be one thing or the other, not two different contradictory things. Learning that Jesus Christ was fully human and fully divine reminded me of the wave-particle duality of electrons when I first heard about it. And I had no problem accepting this apparent violation of the laws of logic. I already knew that quantum theory, in many ways, overruled those laws of reason. How do we know that Jesus was fully divine and fully human? The evidence is found all through the gospel. Jesus' divinity is shown in the miracles he performed. And we also know that he was fully human. He felt betrayed. He was taken to his death. And even though he knew he would rise, he dreaded the ordeal facing him, like any human would. He knew he would suffer as much as any other person subjected to the terrible pain of crucifixion, and he prayed to God to take this cup from him. Thanks to our small friend, the electron, whose dual nature is no less real than that of Jesus Christ, we can see that there are some things once thought to be impossible that science has shown are actually part of the true nature of God's creation. This truth tells us we should not be too quick to say that something we read in Scripture is impossible or unscientific, when we obviously don't know everything there is to know about the science of the natural world. As much as we know now, and we do know a lot, science can turn up amazing new revelations tomorrow. Among them, I'm sure there will be more findings that, while true, are as mysterious as the electron being two different things at once, or that the one single God consists of three persons. So again, I think of this as an example of harmony. Okay, we have this strange thing about Jesus Christ, who we worship, being both God and fully human. But there's a harmonious analogy in quantum physics. The electron is both a wave and a particle. It can't be separated. And I think it's about 5 to 5. Wanted to have a half hour of questions. It looks like we have about 15, 20 minutes, maybe, if lucky. Because the next, starting at 5-ish, it'll be probably more like 5:15. I want to be able to sign books. So I now open it up. If you have any comments, questions. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll confess, I haven't read the book yet. A friend loaned me a copy last week, and he wasn't able to come tonight, but I didn't get a chance to read it. So, I mean, on the one hand, I can understand and appreciate the fact as you look at nature and you make discoveries and you appreciate the grandeur of God. But on the other hand, there's also a dark side to nature. And there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of destruction. And I wonder if you address that in the book, if you somehow weave that into the harmony that you see between science and faith.
I don't remember if I addressed it in the book. I haven't read the whole book recently, but I have addressed it at various times. And I mean, it's part of the very, very, I don't know what to call it, intense subject called the problem of evil, okay, which I often run against online with people asking how you can believe in God when there's a dark side, as you put it, of nature. Yes, there is a dark side. And I believe very firmly, and again, I don't remember if I've actually written this, that if you have a universe consisting of laws, which we have, you're going to have bad things happen. You have to. And it is an example. We have we live on a planet which is conducive to life, and very few planets are. There are many things that make this planet conducive to life, one of which is the tectonic plates, the molten core of the earth. Well, I can't go into all the reasons, that's going to take too long, but those things are required. The problem with that is it also leads to earthquakes. And earthquakes can be terrible and deadly and cause huge suffering, as we know. Volcanoes are another natural event that can wipe out an entire species, and has. But again, without volcanoes, we wouldn't have the kind of active earth that we need to support the kind of life that we have. There's so many examples of this. There's several very good books have been written. One is called Rare Planet. I forgot the authors, the two authors. One is called The Impossible Planet, or The Improbable Planet by Hugh Ross. It's quite well known. They go into great detail talking about the fine tuning of the planet Earth, even where it exists in the solar system. I'm not in the galaxy. It's not in the center. That's true. And if it were in the center, we wouldn't be here. So there are so many things about the planet that allow life to exist, and our kind of life to exist. But the problem is, all of those are dependent on the laws of physics, the laws of nature. And if you don't violate those laws on a regular basis, bad things are going to happen as well. And I will tell you, I grew up in a weird kind of family environment, which I'm not going to go into now, but it's in my first book, Works of His Hands. I grew up thinking that everything was bad. This was a terrible place, and you were lucky if you could survive. And you try to do the best you can against all kinds of horrible, evil forces, both natural and human. And so what I often think, and a lot of people don't like this answer, and I understand that, but I think the mystery is the problem of good. Where does good come from? I know where suffering comes from. It's easy to spot. We know. I don't know where does good come from in an atheist view? I couldn't figure it out. I thought it just came from humans. Humans, for some reason, are good. Well, now I think that the problem of good is resolved if you believe in God, because we do have good stuff that happens. And one of the good things that happen on this planet is life. And again, going back to my next book, which you'll have to wait about a year, but when that comes out, I will make it very clear that there should not be life. The fact that life exists is an unbelievable miracle. And to me, that's enough. Yeah, Eddie?
I've just heard that the chances of us having life on this earth are similar to throwing dice and having snake eyes come up 1,000 times in a row. So that if that helps. So.
Well, that happened to me once in Vegas. I got to tell you that story. Okay. Dan? Any other questions or comments? Just as a matter of curiosity, how many people have read the book? I always ask this. Okay. Have, yes. Okay. So, sorry, say that again, Rick. Coming to Faith Through Dawkins. Yeah. Okay. So, I'll just say a little bit about that. Two British guys I know pretty well who are in the science and faith world community, Dennis Alexander and Alistair McGrath. Alistair McGrath wrote the foreword for my first book. They're both theologians. Dennis is an active scientist. They noticed that there were a lot of people in Britain. Britain has a very high rate of atheism, by the way. But they noticed along with a guy named Justin Brierley, who's also noticed the same thing and written a book about it. They noticed that a lot of people were who you wouldn't expect, who had been atheists, were coming to faith. And when they talked to them about it, many of them said they were just fed up with the new atheism, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, that kind of thing, very aggressive atheism. And so they reached out to a bunch of atheists who had come to faith, including myself, and 11 other people around the world. One of them is Aniko, and asked if we would write chapters about how we came to faith related to new atheism. And they called that book Coming to Faith Through Dawkins. I got to say, I really like, I had not, I submitted a chapter, Aniko submitted a chapter. We had no idea what anybody else, we didn't even know who the other writers were. But I have to say that those essays are really amazing. And they come from all over the world, South Africa, England, Germany, I don't remember. A few scientists, Benny Knott, different walks of life. All of them had been atheists, and all of them had just said to themselves, what Richard Dawkins is saying is nothing but pitiless indifference. You know, is that true? And they came to the conclusion that it wasn't, and they came to faith. And so that book was published by the same publisher, Kriegel, last summer, in August or September, I think. Yeah. And it's done very well, both here and in England. And I recommend it. It's available. The authors, again, are Alexander and the editors. It's under their name, Dennis Alexander and Alistair McGrath. So, yeah. And I have the first chapter. I think, Aniko, yours is number 4 or something. Yeah. And so I would recommend that book. By the way, we get nothing from it. So that recommendation is pure of self-interest. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Well, it's 5 o'clock. So, Martha, do you want to give any directions or?
Directions to give, but I do want to thank you, Cy. You know, you've been a blessing to this church from before my time here and will continue to be, you and Aniko both. And we're so grateful for your witness. He's talked to the youth. Anybody, you know, he's just a wonderful witness for the faith. And that means so much. So there are refreshments out there. There are books to be signed and purchased, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, if you don't have a book and want to buy one,
Right.
they're $20, which I think is $1.50 off the Amazon price. But just if you have a $20 bill, you can get a book. If you prefer to get it from Amazon, that's fine. I mean,
but here's the author. He can sign it for you. So since we're in church, let me just give a benediction to you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
amen. Okay.
Just one last note, if you haven't signed in on the sign-in sheet, I'd love to get your names, contact information, want more information about the organization. So